I've often talked about what a complex machine the financial world actually is. It's almost like a machine that has all kinds of cogs, wheels, levers, and that's why it's so hard to predict actually how it's going to function in the future and what things are going to happen in our future. Now, I'm going to read you an article here from Zero Hedge, and this guy, he says, this guy's named Howard Marks. Howard Marks warns, nobody knows what will happen. Howard Marks, co-chairman of the U.S. investment firm Oaktree Capital, warns that valuations in the markets, the financial markets, are uncomfortably high, and the investors are acting too complacent. When Howard Marks speaks, financial markets listen. The renowned value investor and co-founder of Oaktree Capital looks back at almost 50 years of Wall Street and has seen a thing or two in his successful career. His memos from the chairman, which he sends sporadically to Oaktree clients, are a must-read for investors. Mr. Marks welcomes the journalists to his corner office in the 34th floor of the Midtown Manhattan, with a partial view over Central Park. On the wall hangs a huge gloomy oil painting showing two sailing ships in a severe storm. On the couch lies a heavy volume with old issues of the New York Times from 1929, the month of the historic stock market crash. Those magazines must be worth a little bit, you know. The thing is he says right here, he says, when we look at stock market valuations, they are very rich. In the case of the S&P 500, they were only higher in 1929 and in 1999 through the year 2000. So basically what he's saying is, look out, beware. The stock market is overvalued. But now, if we switch channels here for a minute, and we take a look at Martin Armstrong. Martin Armstrong has a totally different story. He says that the stock market's going to double in value. Now, you say to yourself, well, that'll make me rich if the stock market doubles in value. And I'm going to tell you, no, it won't. Because essentially, if we have a stock market now that's overvalued and it decides it's going to double in value, this means we're going into a hyperinflation. And the money in the stock market's not going to be worth near as much. It's going to drop in its purchasing power. It's probably going to drop. The stock market goes up double, and the money loses 50% of its purchasing power. I mean, you getting the idea? In the same amount of time, if we have a hyperinflation, gold's probably going to go up 10 times. So the stock market doubles, but gold goes up 10 times. So gold will beat the stock market if we do have a hyperinflation, like Martin Armstrong's talking about. But what's really going on here, and I'm not laughing at what Martin Armstrong has to say, and there's a reason why. What's really going on here is a war, and the Fed is at the center of this war. And it depends on what the Fed does, which way it's going to go. If the Fed continues to raise rates at a strong rate and continuing to raise rates and continues to sell their balance sheet and doesn't do any more quantitative easing or any more backdoor bailouts or stops using the exchange stabilization fund and stuff like that, what's going to happen is if they continue with this massive tightening and they don't ease up on the tightening, then what's going to happen is we're going to go into a deflation if they continue with this tightening. But if the Fed decides that they're not going to continue with the tightening, that they're going to turn a little bit of an about face and they're going to haul back on these interest rate hikes, and that they're going to become more dovish on selling their toxic balance sheet, and that they decide that they're going to start pumping more liquidity into the system, that's when we could get the scenario that Martin Armstrong is talking about here, where everything starts to take off and heat up. The tendency for the system is not to stay like it is right now. The tendency is for it to either go up or down. And that's because there's an awful lot of leverage in the system. That's why the tendency is for the system to flip. And the tendency is for it to flip in one of these two directions, either deflation or inflation. We've been arguing now, going back all the way back years and years and years, this argument over deflation or hyperinflation or deflation. Arguing, like, which way is this thing going to flip? And it's taken a long time to flip because the Fed has been doing a balancing act. And I got to hand it to them. They've been particularly good in their balancing act. They've been able to balance this thing. But what it's like is, because the leverage keeps increasing in the system, I'm going to use an analogy to explain to you why the Fed cannot continue with this balancing act. Do you remember in the old days there used to be these guys that used to do what was called spinning plates? Well, when these guys used to spin plates, they used to go on shows like what was called the Ed Sullivan Show. And I know a lot of you guys don't remember the Ed Sullivan Show, but he would often have a guy on there that would be spinning plates. And basically what spinning plates is they have these long sticks, and they put the plate on the end of the long stick and they give it a spin, and it'll stay up there for a long time as long as it's spinning. But when the plate stops spinning, the plate will fall off of the stick. And so what they would do is set up quite literally 100 of these sticks and get all these plates spinning, and they would have to keep running back to the plates that were slowing down and getting ready to fall and give them another spin. And they kept adding more and more sticks. And these guys had to move fast, and they had to have good timing. Because if they didn't spin the plate would wobble off and fall and crash down on the floor and shatter. And so some of these guys could keep like 100 plates spinning. But the more plates they added, the harder and harder it got for them to keep these plates spinning. It was easy when they only had 1 or 2 plates. Now, this is what the Fed's doing. The more leverage gets added into the system, the more bubbles we have. And it's like the spinning plates. And the more they add and the more leverage they put into the system, the harder and harder it is to keep all these bubbles from popping and keep all the plates from falling down and basically the system from crashing down into a deflation. But at the same time, if they over-lever too much, the system's going to take off and heat up, and we're going to get inflation, because what will happen is the banks have been storing all of this liquidity that the Federal Reserve has been. This is where it's went. The banks have stored it all away. And they've got this liquidity. All of that money that was created during quantitative easing never made its way into the system. I'll use another illustration to help you understand. Oftentimes this has happened. It's a situation that's very dangerous. A man will have a cabinet where he keeps his liquor, and he'll have a key, you know, and he'll keep his hard liquor in the liquor cabinet. And his kids are at home, you know, say he's got a teenage boy, say his boy's like 13 years old or something, right? And so he keeps the key and he keeps it locked, the liquor cabinet, so it's fine. So say his father goes away on vacation or something, and the young man gets into the liquor cabinet by stealing the key. Well, he grabs a bottle of vodka, and all of his friends are there, the young man. He says, look, I'm going to try this vodka. And they all laugh at him, and everybody's giggling and laughing, all the boys, you know, and they're all there. And he says, they will drink it, chug, chug, chug. You know, so he grabs a vodka bottle, and he drinks down about, maybe, I don't know, 6 or 8 ounces of vodka. The kid does. And it goes down into his belly. And 5 or 10 minutes go by, and the kid says, look, I'm fine. I don't feel a thing. I'm fine. So he tips the bottle up again, and he glugs the rest of the bottle down, another 10 ounces or whatever. What's happened is when that alcohol hit that young man's stomach, an empty stomach, there's a layer of mucus in the stomach, on the wall of the stomach membrane. And that alcohol has to slowly make its way through that layer of mucus to make it into the bloodstream. And so it's what's called a delayed reaction. So all of a sudden, about a half an hour later, the young man starts to get overdrunk, and the first thing you know, he ends up in the hospital. If he's lucky, he doesn't die. Because it's a delayed reaction of all that alcohol that he drank. The mucus acted to delay the alcohol going into his bloodstream. Well, at the banking system, there's also a delayed reaction. So all of that liquidity that was poured into the banking system during quantitative easing 1, quantitative easing 2, Operation Twist, quantitative easing 3, and so on and so forth, went into a liquidity trap. Now that money that they put in there, which was actually trillions of dollars, T with a T, trillions with a T, that money that they put, that liquidity that they put into the banking system, didn't fully make it out with its full impact into the system because interest rates are so low. The banks can't make any money lending that money out with interest rates down near zero, or ZIRP, or even NIRP, negative interest rate policy, ZIRP, zero interest rate policy. So because that money couldn't make it into the actual system, it's like the alcohol in the kid's bloodstream. But there's another factor that even makes it worse, and it's called fractional reserve banking. The fact that these banks can actually 10 times that money. So that money that went in to the system as say trillions went into the system, now can be turned into tens of trillions when the banks start lending it out. But to lend it out, they need what's called a bid. And a bid is how much money they're going to get as in return for lending it out. Now, with zero interest rate policy, there's no incentive for the bank to lend that money out. But when interest rates start to go up, and they're going to, then they'll start to lend that money out, and that's how banks make money. The real lot of money in the system is not created by quantitative easing. The most money in the system is actually created by the banks through fractional reserve lending. This is the real money creation tool. And it also stimulates the economy. So when we finally see this whole thing break loose, and believe me, it's going to, what we're going to see is an improvement in the economy. An improvement in the economy is going to be the first sign of chaos to come, of the hyperinflation. As long as we're going along now like it is in the doldrums, with the economy just barely sputtering along like on 2 cylinders, it's like a car that's running on 2 cylinders. That's what the economy's like right now. And an awful lot of these economists out there are pointing to that, and they're saying, oh, look, it's the beginning of the hyperinflation because the economy is running on 2 cylinders. No. For the hyperinflation to actually start, what we need is the economy to heat up. Then inflation will heat up with the economy. And as the money starts to lose its buying power through heavy inflation, we're talking maybe the oil price going way up, the price of everything going way up, inflation heating up past the 2% target that the Fed's looking for. Inflation going really high, I don't know, maybe 10% or whatever. That's when people are going to start to say, hey, you know, times are good now again. Why am I keeping this money in savings? See, right now, they're all holding their money back. They're all hoarding it. They're putting it in the bank. They're saying, hey, you know, I'm not going to spend on this. I'm not going to spend on that. I'm keeping my money in the bank because I'm earning, even though it's a low percentage of interest, or maybe it's in this this savings account or whatever, and they're keeping their money back. They're hoarding it. But when they start to feel good, and the economy actually starts to pick up, this is when they're going to see the inflation, and they're going to say, hey, you know, why am I saving this money? Because I might as well buy that new car because next year it's going to be more expensive than this year. And my money's losing value in the bank. And the first thing you know, the economy starts to get red hot. What this causes is, we've been riding along on 2 cylinders, like a car on 2 cylinders for years now. And the velocity of money has been almost nil. Almost nil. And the interest rates have been right down on rock bottom. The banks haven't been lending money out. We've been in this almost deflation. It's just right on the edge of being deflationary. There's very little inflation. And it's hard to get it out of this mode. When it's in this mode, it's hard to get it out. It's like the Fed, they're trying to get it out, but at the same time, they're doing things that cause it. But when it finally pulls out of this mode, when oil prices start to really go up again, that's going to really help pull it out of this mode. And when it comes out, that's when we're going to be in for an actual pickup in the economy. The velocity of money is going to pick up. Everything's going to start to boom. That is when we're in for it. That is when the system's going to destroy itself. And that's when Martin Armstrong is going to be correct. That's when the stock market is actually going to double. And it'll probably double in not that long a period of time once this actually begins. And that's when you're going to see your rally in gold, your rally in silver. Everything's going to move up simultaneously, all at the same time. The stock market, everything's going to go up. We're going to have this economic boom. The velocity of money is going to pick up, and that is the first beginnings of the hyperinflation that's coming. But we got to get through this deflation first. And I believe that this deflation we're going through now is going to end in an event I call a deflationary spike event. That's going to be the trigger for the Fed to turn everything around. The Fed to stop all of the stuff that they're doing now and switch gears. In essence, when they switch gears, that's when everything's going to start to go in the opposite direction. So both of these guys I read to you about, this Howard Marks, who's very concerned and says nobody will know what will happen. He's a very good economist, and he like it says right here. It says he's the co-chairman of U.S. investment firm Oaktree Capital, and it says when Howard Marks speaks, financial markets listen. So I think he's going to be correct. He is saying that the market is overpriced and the whole thing is going to go into what I've been talking about, this deflationary spike event. This is what he sees coming. You know? And he says it's more overpriced right now than it has ever been in history. He says the only other time in history were 1929 and in the year 2000 that was this overpriced. So he's very concerned that we're in for a bust. And this is the deflationary spike event that I see. But then on the other hand, Martin Armstrong's correct too, because once this is done and over with, and this deflationary spike event is done and over with, then we're going to get what Martin Armstrong's talking about, with the stock market going to double. He says the stock market's going to double. So in closing, I'm going to let you listen to a couple of minutes of Martin Armstrong on his talk on the 27th of September 2017 on Revenge Economics. You can find this, and you might want to listen to the rest of this article. You can find it if you go to the channel Revenge Economics. That's where I found it, and I only recorded a couple minutes of it so you guys could get an idea of what he's talking about. But the full program is 42 minutes and 29 seconds. So listen, thank you guys for listening, and here's Martin Armstrong, and we'll catch you guys in the next episode. Bye.
Buy gold, and they got to put it in a warehouse, and they got to pay to store it. So
right.
From an institutional standpoint, it's a different animal.
Yeah.
Gold will go up, but when it goes up, it's going to be basically kind of like the 70s, where almost everything on the tangible side goes up. Even the stock market and gold rallied together at that point. And so you just have to understand what is the real driving force. And it's not the quantity of money and all this stuff that people are talking about and hyperinflation. Hyperinflation is caused by confidence. A collapse in confidence in government. That's
right.
Really what it is.
Sure.
And, all the stuff that, they were saying, is gold's going to take off because, the Fed isn't. If you really just step back and forget all the nonsense that these people talk about, fine. Yeah, the Fed increase was buying like $4 trillion. Great. Then what did the banks say? Okay, where are we going to put our money? We need a place to put it. So then the Fed says, okay, fine. Yeah, we understand. So we'll create excess reserves. So that's me giving you $100 and then saying I want 80 back.
Yeah, the sterilization.
And then you also have this false idea of what a central bank is doing. And this is why I say that the dollar will not be the reserve currency going forward, but it's not. This is something that is really seriously being talked about, how to stop the dollar. Because what's the Federal Reserve's problem? They wanted to raise interest rates starting in 13. All right. They had to wait to 2015. Why? Because they were being lobbied by everybody. Yeah. IMF, all the Europe, etc. Oh, gee, if you raise interest rates, you'll hurt us. So honestly, from behind the curtain, what's going on is the Federal Reserve feels that it has been turned into the default central bank of the world.